What's up everyone? So today we'll be talking about the for loop, so let's get straight into it. So before talking about the for loop, let's get familiar with what is an iterable data type. So the only data types that we know of that are iterable are strings and lists, and they are considered iterable because we can basically loop through the items. That essentially just means that we can basically go through the items one by one and do stuff to each item. Iterable just means that you can basically go through the items individually. And strings and lists, you can do that because if you think about it, you can basically loop through the items of a list, or you can also loop through the characters in a string. So these are the only two iterable data types that we currently know of, but there are more iterable types that we haven't covered yet. And we can use a for loop to iterate over iterable data types. So before we actually talk about the for loop, I want to show you what the for loop accomplishes with things that we already know how to do. So we're basically going to build our own for loop using the concepts that we already know of. So for our first example, let's just consider that we have this list of colors, and let's just say that we wanted to loop through this list, going through and basically like printing out the items individually. So we already know how to access items in a list. We can just say I is equal to 0, and then we'll print colors at index I. And you see we get red. And so what loops essentially do is they pretty much do this. They are going to go through the list one by one, and basically I is going to be updated to be something else. So this is essentially what loops can do. So just for example, if we print, then you see we get the items printed out individually, and basically I is just incremented once each time we print. So the first time we print I is 0, then it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. And this basically just correlates with the indices of color. So as we saw in the last video, there's a better way to do this, and we can use a while loop to do that. So instead of having all these statements, we can just say while I is less than the length of colors. Okay, so while I is less than the length of colors, we'll print colors at index I, and then we'll increment I by 1. And if we run our code, you see we get the same output. So there's actually a better way to do this, and we can use a for loop to accomplish the same thing, but it's much easier to use the for loop. So instead of doing it this way, we can just say for, and then we basically have to specify a variable name, and the variable name is going to basically represent each item in the list. So like the variable name will at first represent red, and then on the second iteration of the loop, the variable name will be representing blue, and then the third time it'll be representing green, and so on and so forth. So we have to specify a variable name after the for, so we can just say for item, or this can be anything, it's just a variable name. So for item in colors, and then the colon, and then on the next line we have to indent, and then we basically just run whatever code we want. So in this case we'll just print the item. And so now lines 13 through 14 are doing the exact same thing as lines 7 through 10. So just to show you all, I'm going to comment out all these lines, just so Python is not going to run these lines, but just to show you all that we get the same output as we did before, let's just run our code, and you see we get the same output. Okay, just to show you all, if we were to use a for loop on a string, that would look something like this. We can just say name is equal to, just set it to my name, and we'll say for, we want our variable name to be representative of what it's storing, so in this case we'll say for character in name. We could have also said like letter or anything, but let's just print the character. And you see it individually goes through my name character by character. So just like with the while loop, we can also use the keywords break and continue. So let me just demonstrate what that would look like. So for example, let's just iterate over the items of colors. So we'll say for color in colors. We'll say if color is equal to, let's just say blue, then we want to break. And then after that conditional statement, then we'll just print the current color. So using in this case, we only get red because it basically is iterating through, and the first time color is red. So color is red on the first iteration, so it prints the color, and then on the second iteration, color is blue, which activates this conditional statement, and it runs the break statement, and then we break out of the for loop. So we just stop looping. So that's just one example of using break, but we can also exchange this for continue, and it'll work similarly how it did in the while loops. You see we get red, green, and yellow. So it essentially skips over blue because we basically continue to the next iteration of the loop. So one more thing I want to talk about is the range function. So the range function can work with for loops to basically get us a range of numbers. So let me just show you what that looks like. So we'll say for I in range. And inside the parentheses, we have to pass in like a maximum number. So this will give us numbers 0 through whatever number we pass in. So if we want, say, the numbers 0 through 10, then we'd have to say we'd have to say range 11, because this is going to give us numbers 0 through 11, not including 11. So this will actually give us numbers 0 through 10. And then if we just print I inside of the loop, and then run our code, you see we get numbers 0 through 10. So the range function is super helpful if you want to get like integers, and since they're integers, we can actually use these as indices for a list. So for example, if we had that same list of colors, so remember how the length function returned the number of items in colors? So we can actually, instead of saying 11, we can say for I in range length of colors. And then we'll print I. So you see this gives us numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, and these can be used as indices for colors. So if we actually just print colors at index I, then this is another way to access all the elements or all the items in the list. So we can basically use the range function to get integers, and then we can use those integers as indices for the list. So the last thing I want to show you all is that we can have nested for loops. So for example, we could say this: for color in colors, print color. So by now we should know what this does. This is just going to give us, this is going to loop through the colors individually. So we can have another for loop inside of here. Since these are all strings, they're all iterable types, which means that we can have another for loop inside of here. So instead of just printing colors, we can say like for letter in color, print letter. So now this is basically going to loop through each character of each item. So it's going to print RED, BLUE, GREEN, just all on different print statements. So just to show you all, you see we get RED, BLUE, GREEN. So this is a basic example of a nested loop, and they're helpful if you want to iterate over like more than just one dimension of data. So that's about it for for loops. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.